particular meeting is partially supported by Poznań in the studios under the program Akademicki Poznań. So, first of all, I would like to welcome our speaker, Professor Papadimitriou. So, please. Professor Christos Papadimitriou was born in Greece and he studied electrical engineering at the National Technical University of Athens, and in 1973 he emigrated to the United States, chiefly for political reasons. He was awarded a PhD from Princeton University in electrical and engineering and computer science in 1976. Then he was an assistant professor at Harvard University, then associate professor at MIT, then professor at Stanford, and then UCSD and Berkeley. So he has written and co-authored 5 technical books, including a textbook, the textbook Algorithm, and the graduate textbooks Combinatorial Optimization and Computational Complexity, as well as over 400 research papers on the theory of algorithms and complexity and its applications in computer systems, databases, control systems, artificial intelligence, robotics, networks, internet, economics, game theory, biology, evolution, and the brain. He's member of National Academy of Sciences, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and the National Academy of Engineering, and an ACM Fellow. The ACM is associated for computer machinery. So he was awarded Knut Prize in 2002, Gödel Prize in 2012, EATSS Award in 2015, IEEE von Neumann Medal in 2016, and doctorates honoris causa from ETH in Zurich and University of Macedonia, University of Athens, University of Patras, the University of Cyprus, National Academy, Technical University of Athens, and EPFL Lausanne, so École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, and University of Paris. In 2014, the president of Hellenic Republic named him Commander of the Order of Phoenix. In addition to his technical work, Professor Papadimitriou has published 3 novels: Turing, published in 2003, the international bestseller Logicomics in 2010. This one was published or translated to Polish in 2011, and also Independence in 2013. This one is in Greek, as well as a book of essays in Greek. So let me welcome once more our distinguished guest and Professor Papadimitriou. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Very nice to be here. Many thanks for your kind words. It's a great pleasure to be here, a great honor to take part in a tribute to the memory and glory of these 3 wonderful people. sons of this university. Basically, we are all trying to be good mathematicians, to be servants of this ancient, beautiful, powerful field. And these people have have taken it further to the next level, because they have done mathematics that transcend mathematics, that basically served the country they loved, and they made the world better. So it's a very uncommon achievement, and I'm in awe of what they achieved. In a very little way, what I'm going to tell you about is, is trying to transcend computer science in directions that are not entirely obvious, and it's. First of all, I have to explain the title. Why would a computer scientist think about the brain? Okay, and it's sort of a long story. For a long time, computer scientists were thinking about the computer, which, I mean, the younger people among you are probably in disbelief. Why would anybody think about the computer? Right? I mean, no, it's hard to believe that computer scientists were so obsessed with the computer for so long. Okay, we were so obsessed that in English we named our science after the computer. Okay, this is very strange. But thank God this prehistory is over now, and we are no longer interested in the computer. Okay, so because since 95, the computer science is about the internet. Okay, computer scientists study the internet. Okay, so and we think of the computer occasionally as the gadget that brought us the internet. Okay, and it has no further significance. And this was an important turning point for computer science, I believe, because the internet opened the field up to other great things. I should mention, okay, I should not belittle the pre-1995 period of computer science so much. It had another amazing contribution. First of all, it solved a lot of technical problems, like writing compilers, databases, chips, and so on. These were amazing engineering achievements that deserve mention and glory. But I think the most important contribution of that period is the formulation of the P versus NP problem, okay, which is, to my mind, one of the deep universal pan-human questions. I mean, is exhaustive search always necessary? But the point is that we started studying the internet, and the internet transformed computer science, because the internet is in some sense universal. Okay, so it engulfed all of humanity very quickly, together with thinking about the universe, about the internet, computer scientists start thinking about the universe. I bet very few of you had noticed before how similar the internet and the universe are. Okay. They're practically identical, okay? But when I say study the universe, I mean that, I mean two things, okay? One, that quite important, that the study of the internet turned computer science in a social science, because the internet is about people. So it brought computer science very close to people, and it made us very interested in, very much akin to social sciences, and computer scientists started taking economics and sociology seriously, psychology also, and so on. So that's one big thing. The second and perhaps more transformative difference that the internet made is that, unlike all other things that we have been studying before 1995, we were studying things that we had created, okay, which is a very easy thing, okay? You design something and then you study it. Since 1995, we have been studying the internet, and the internet is something that we did not create. Okay, nobody created the internet. The internet emerged, all right? I mean, we had to approach the internet with the same puzzled humility in which physicists approach the universe, neuroscientists approach the brain, biologists approach the cell. Okay, economists approach the market, I should say. Okay, and this, in other words, when I say the universe, I mean we started studying all these things, all right? I mean, and suddenly computer science became much broader than before. And there is this ambitious project which is trying to use computation and computer science as a lens. By this I mean that when a computer scientist looks at applies what they know about computation and algorithms to problems in the other sciences, very often, and we have seen this in statistical physics, we have seen it in quantum mechanics, and I'll show you some examples here also. Unexpected progress happens, and the reason is that there is latent computation in all of these scientific objects and models. In any event, what I'm going to talk about today is 3 examples of this mode of research, trying to understand realms of science using computation as your compass. I'll talk about games, I'll talk about evolution, but most of the talk is going to be about the brain. Okay? So let's start with games. In game theory, basically what in economics and what we are trying to do is understand and predict the behavior of large groups of agents, each one of whom has their own utility, their own selfish interests, okay? And they react to what everybody else does in a particular ways. And this, of course, defines dynamical systems, which economists also study. But these are usually hard to study, okay, and hard to understand and chaotic. But so for the most part, economists and social scientists are interested in equilibria. Okay? And equilibria sort of is the end stage of a system of agents where everybody else is happy with what everybody else is doing, okay? And they cannot see a better way to improve their station, their position. For example, that's an equilibrium, okay? The lemon would love to be at the bottom of the bowl, okay? But so everybody is optimizing what they're doing with respect to what everybody else is doing, okay? That's what equilibrium is. And so the first famous result about equilibria came by the greatest mathematician of the era, when he was actually in his 20s. John von Neumann proved that equilibria exist in games as long as the games are zero-sum and two-person. In other words, almost never. Okay, but that was an important first step, and this was completed more than 2 decades later, when John Nash, in his PhD thesis, proved that all games have one. Okay, and this was a very important turning point for game theory and economics, as I'm going to argue. Let's stop to remember the way that John von Neumann chose to put down the incredible result of a young mathematician. So, you know, he told John Nash, it's just 6 points, right? Even though 5 years before, von Neumann had written a book, an 800-page book, in the middle of which there was a hole with a precise shape of Nash's theorem. Okay, and I'm sure that he was very disappointed that he did not prove it himself. In any event, as I said, this was a watershed moment for economics, because inspired by Nash's result, two other mathematicians, Arrow and Debreu, proved that an ancient problem due to Valras had a solution, and under appropriate circumstances, economies have markets have equilibria, price equilibria. Roger Myerson wrote much later that the Nash equilibrium lies at the foundations of modern economic thought. Okay. Incidentally, this slide has less than 20 words and 4 Nobel Prizes. Okay, it's not easy to do. Okay, you know. Right. So, so what Nash's theorem tells us is that in every possible situation where agents engage in the way that I mentioned before, in all of these situations there is a way for equilibrium to be reached. Okay, and this is very useful, because in some sense it's a license to economists when they study a particular market, a particular design, a particular institution that they are thinking about, to say, let's see what happens at equilibrium. Okay, and this has been sort of the universal method of economics since the 1950s. So here comes a result from computer science. Okay, that the equilibrium is intractable to find computationally. Okay, assuming of course that the world of complexity is as we think it is. Okay, and this says something important in the light of what I told you before. Okay, it tells you that maybe this equilibrium exists, but you cannot assume that the group of agents, the market, will ever reach it. Okay, because of what, you know, it is as if Nash's theorem said that almost all games have an equilibrium. Not all games have an equilibrium. The universality of Nash's theorem is sort of suspect, is false. And I know that among you there are many doubters of what intractability usually means, because it's true that in practice may not mean that much, okay? Because there are many people we know who earn a honest living by solving intractable problems, okay? So in practice, maybe intractability does not mean that much. But in theory, okay? And my point was that the Nash equilibrium is a theoretical tool, okay? And basically it says that the license of economists to think this way is revoked, okay? Because you know, as somebody said, if your laptop can find it, neither can the market. Okay, so you know you cannot assume that the group of agents will ever converge to this equilibrium. So in any event, this is how, you know, remember the words of Myerson that the equilibrium lies at the foundations of economic thought. Okay, you know, this theorem says that there is a serious computational hole in the foundations of economic thought. Okay, so I'll leave this subject there. There are much more that can be said and much more that can be done actually mathematically, starting from this. But let's stop here and tell you another story, evolution. Okay, that's a more complicated story, and I will say even less about it. But let's start here. I mean, of all sciences, I mean, who knows when mathematics started, okay? Who knows when physics started? We know when evolution started, okay? You know, it started in 1859, you know, with the publication of Darwin's book. But 150 years later, what happened, okay? One thing that I'm sure, you know, catches nobody here by surprise to say is that Darwin's book was not the last word of the subject. Okay, you know, Darwin's book barely started the science of evolution, and a lot has been happened since. A lot of developments, a lot of turmoil, a lot of reconciliation. The reconciliation, by the way, which was mediated by mathematics. Okay, so you know there is something called the modern synthesis, which basically is three mathematicians, Fisher, Wright, and Haldane, created a theory, the population genetics, which reconciled Mendel and Darwin. And basically, this is how people have been thinking about evolution ever since. So this is what I'm saying here. It's the standard equations called population genetics, which create sort of, you know, a quantitative mathematical way of modeling Darwin's abstract concept of fitness and the evolution of populations over successive generations. So if you consider a population that has a lot of genotypes, and the genotypes interact, and they procreate by using recombination and sex, then there are equations that tell you, that predict what will happen. There are interesting mathematical equations, sort of a dynamical system. And very annoyingly, over the last 3 decades, we have a lot of data, okay? And when, you know, for a long time, evolution was a theory without data, okay? And now we have data, and the theory is in trouble, okay? So I'll tell you what kind of trouble. Here are some really huge questions. First of all, data show you that that there is much. Oops. So I'm not a good user of this. Okay. Why so much genetic diversity? Okay. Data show you that there is between 10 and 100 times. You know that. Look around you, okay? We are not the same, right? I mean, there are 10 times more genetic diversity in populations than the theory would predict, okay? What is the role of sex? Believe it or not, sort of, you know, 100 years after intense study, there is, and despite all the, you know, I think each one of us thinks that they understand why recombination is important in evolution. And the message I have for you is that the jury is still out, okay? There is a consensus that none of the explanations we have, order combination, is enough to explain why there is sex, why there is recombination. And here is sort of, you know, a mathematical equation, a mathematical question. It would be very satisfactory to find the Lyapunov function followed by evolution, okay? So, you know, and people, evolution theories have been trying, okay? So, you know, and it's still not clear. You know, there is no mathematical formulation that tells you that evolution tries to optimize this, okay? And here is one computer science way of summarizing this and more questions, okay? What algorithm could have created all this in a mere trillion years, okay? Trillion steps, sorry. Trillion steps. By steps, I mean generations, okay? There are so many generations between the dawn of life and now, okay? If you make a division, you'll see that most of our ancestors lived for less than a day, okay? But the fact is that, I mean, 1 trillion steps sounds a lot, right? But it's not. Your cell phone has done more than 1 trillion steps since the beginning of my talk. Okay, and it has not accomplished much. Okay, so it's a very interesting. Yeah, believe it or not, I'm going to shed some light to all 4 of these questions in the next 3 slides. Okay. All right. So it turns out that we proved a theorem, not a hard theorem. It's basically algebraic manipulation of equations that have been around for 80 years, okay? And very close to the surface. Except that sort of, it was waiting for somebody with the right background to look at these equations again. And it turns out that you can view these mathematical equations, the ones by Fisher, Wright, and Haldane that I mentioned before, you can view them under certain preconditions, mathematical conditions, as a game, okay? So, the standard population genetics model for the evolution of a population under sex, in other words, these are not a sexual species, it's a sexual species, it recombines genes, and weak selection. This means, it's a technical term, it's a regime that biologists accept. It means that selection is not extremely dramatic, okay? That you don't have very dramatic effects. That selection advantage between different genotypes is relatively small. So it turns out that under these circumstances, you can think of evolution of a population as a repeated game between genes, okay? So basically, what you have a species, a population. The species has genes, okay? And basically what changes from a generation to the next, for every gene, it is the distribution of its alleles, of its variants, okay? Is it 30-30-40? Is it 50-20-30? What is it, okay? This is what changes through sex, from one generation to the next. So the end message of this theorem is that you can think of the evolution of a population under some conditions as the genes of this population sitting around a table and playing a game, okay? Repeated game. The repetitions are the generations, okay? So every generation they play a game. The strategies of each gene are its alleles, okay? The variants with which this gene occur in the population, okay? For example, our gene for hemoglobin has 3 variants, okay? So in the population of humans today, it has some probabilities like 28, 32, 40 or something. So these are the strategies. The probabilities of play are the frequencies, okay? So the frequencies in every generation of every allele of every gene, together they comprise the strategy of this gene. So in other words, this is not Dawkins' allegory of the selfish gene, okay? These are the cooperative genes, all right? I mean, they care about one thing, and that's the fitness, the average fitness of the population, okay? So the common utility, all these have a common utility. This is a coordination game, as it's called in game theory. And the common utility is organism's fitness. And here comes the big surprise, that the genes update their probabilities of play. So basically, from one each play of the game to the next, for each generation, every gene has to decide how to change the probabilities of play, right? And it turns out that it changed the probability of play according to the multiplicative updates algorithm, which is utterly surprising, because the multiplicative updates algorithm is a relatively new algorithm. We've only known it for 20 years. It's a very simple algorithm. I'll explain it to you. You probably know about it. It is the engine behind a very, very popular AI program called AdaBoost. It's extremely simple, and yet it solves a problem it didn't deserve to solve, okay? So, for example, it solves convex programming. It solves network congestion, okay? So, and I'll tell you what it is, and you'll see why I'm insisting that it's extremely simple. That at each step, you increase the frequency of allele I by a factor which is essentially epsilon times the fitness of this allele in the present mix of other alleles, okay? So what is the expected fitness of this allele in the present environment? You multiply this by epsilon, you multiply this frequency by 1 plus epsilon, and you normalize to keep it a probability distribution, and that's it. All right, so in an event, so I find it very surprising that if you look, with the right microscope at this ancient algorithm, ancient dynamical system, what you see is genes playing this game. Okay, it goes a little further. You can take this game. Okay, so this strange algorithm where every gene takes the current frequencies, computes something, and plays this strategy the next generation. So you can ask yourself a question: why is this gene doing this? Is it optimizing something? Okay, and this time you can reverse engineer the formula and find that yes, it's optimizing something. Okay, and we have the function. Here is the function. It optimizes this function. So X is the distribution of frequencies, is the distribution of alleles. So it chooses the X the next time to maximize this phi of X. And phi of X has two components. One is fitness, and the other is entropy. Okay, in other words, it tries to optimize fitness, but if you wish, it regularizes by entropy. And this means that it tries, to take the gambler analogy. If it finds an allele that is very good, it does not go all in. Okay, it does not make it 100%, because it tries to keep the diversity, to keep the distribution as diverse as reasonable. So here is the sort of surprising result. If you remember the big questions, why so much genetic diversity? Well, I don't know. But the fact is that I have a mathematical equation which genes seem to optimize, and there you have entropy. Okay, so this means something. What is the role of sex? I'm convinced that the role of sex, that sex is so successful in evolution. The reason for that is that it enables the multiplicative weights algorithm. Okay, my colleague Umesh Vazirani, my co-author in this, when we proved this theorem, he told me, Christos, now I have more faith in evolution. Okay, is evolution optimizing something? Well, we don't know, but we found something, a particular function that the genes of a population seem to be optimizing, and sort of we gave some insight to the final question: what algorithm could have done all this in a mere trillion steps? Okay, so that's as much as I want to tell you about evolution. And now I'm coming to the main part of what I'm going to talk about, which is the brain. Okay. All right. So that's joint work with computer scientist colleague, a very brilliant young man, Santosh Vempala at Georgia Tech, and Wolfgang Maass, a former computer scientist who's now a neuroscientist. He works at University of TU Graz. Okay. So, we all think intuitively our brains and computers are something very similar, okay? But if you think about it a little closer, they are as different as they could be, okay? Babies do amazing things, computers do amazing things, and there seem to be no intersection, okay? So, all right? We study algorithms, we invent algorithms. When we cannot, we prove the problem is intractable, and the brain goes and solves the problems in its own way. Okay, so which is usually completely different. very recently, okay, we have deep nets who do amazing things. And their inspiration comes from the brain. And we all know, and especially deep net researchers know better than everybody, that they are very dissimilar from brain, okay? The brain could not be working this way. Finally, over the past 20 years, we've seen an explosion of what we know about the brain, of what we know about cells, synapses, and molecules, okay? And still, this does not tell us anything about the great question, which is the emergence of the mind, okay? How does this wet, grungy, organic stuff gives rise to theorems and complex thoughts, okay? So that's, to me, an amazingly important question, okay? So, you know, I'll tell you. The way I think of this question is as a sunset over the Golden Gate Bridge question, okay? In the following sense, that whenever I see this, what I'm thinking is, why isn't everybody stopping what they're doing and come here to see this, okay? When I think about this question, that's my mood, okay? So, you know, why is everybody working on anything else, okay? So, you know, to me, it's the greatest question of science today. Being a computer scientist, I want to see how I can think computationally about the brain, okay? And Turing and von Neumann thought computation about the brain, okay? So, you know, so Turing, you know, in his Turing machine, you know, used the brain both as an inspiration for his Turing machine and as a challenge in his AI work, okay? Von Neumann wrote a very nice little book in the 1950s. It was published posthumously, where he, among the other things he says, is that, you know, on the basis of nothing, because back then we knew nothing about the brain. You know, he had this amazing insight that once we find out how the brain works, we'll be surprised how different it is from computers, okay? From actual algorithms. And this to me is very prescient. Les Valiant, a great computer scientist at Harvard, have been thinking on the brain for more than 20 years, and he has given us two great thoughts. One is a computational theory of the brain is both possible and essential, okay? And the other is a very interesting model, algorithmic model of the brain, which, however, has not had much following and does not seem to conform with what we know now about the brain, but still it was an extremely brave, very early attempt at understanding computationally the brain. Even earlier, David Marr, so he's sort of a founder of computational neuroscience. He's an Alan Turing-like figure. He was my colleague at MIT when he died in 1980. He wrote brilliantly about the brain, but he really, his contribution was published posthumously. It was a methodology for understanding the brain. Okay, so he said that you start with specifications. Okay, in other words, what is the input-output? What does the system you want to analyze do? And then you devise the algorithm and the hardware for doing it. Okay, you know, so that it's a sort of a very interesting way of looking at things. So everybody's asking this question. Everybody in computer science is asking this question. What is the algorithm run of the brain? Okay, and maybe if there is not one algorithm, maybe there are 10 algorithms. Okay, so you know, but pick one. Okay, which one is running by the brain? And you know, and I believe that this is a non-starter. Okay, it's not the right question to ask because I believe that Marr thought that there are more than 100 different systems in the brain, and so we should be looking for more than 100 algorithms. Okay, you know, And so we want to come up with computational theory models that are, first of all, they conform with what we know from experiments. And we should start by admitting that it's not going to be a single answer, okay? That's going to be a lot of algorithms, okay? A lot, you know, we should be ready for the long haul of discovering them one by one. And I have an interesting place to start, which is somewhere the boundary between symbolic and subsymbolic brain function. And let me explain what I mean. It's the Jennifer Aniston. How many of you know Jennifer Aniston? Know who? Okay, yeah. So I did not. Okay, you know. So you know, believe it or not, I mean, you know, in 2005, in an experiment, they found that in people there is a cell that responds to Jennifer Aniston. Okay. And this is called the Jennifer Aniston cell. Okay, so you know, they also respond to other things, and that's why they call them concept cells. Okay, it's very funny. So you know, after this talk, you will have not only a Jennifer Aniston cell, but you're going to have a Jennifer Aniston cell. Think about it. Okay, and don't go down this path. Okay, it's not good. Okay, in any event. Let me tell you a very interesting experiment, okay? That was last year. They were recording from one neuron in one person, okay? Actually, they were recording from a few dozen people and a few dozen neurons in each, but let's concentrate on one neuron and one person, all right? And they'll show them about 100 images. So they show them, every time they show them the Eiffel Tower, this neuron fired, okay? They show them the Forbidden City, nothing. They show them the Eiffel Tower, it fires. They show them Barack Obama. Believe it or not, he was the president of the United States a few months ago. So the neuron doesn't fire, okay? The Eiffel Tower, okay. Now they do the following. They Photoshop Obama in front of the Eiffel Tower, okay? Perhaps a little better than I did here, okay? So, and of course, the neuron sees the Eiffel Tower, as always, it fires. After that, they show him the Eiffel Tower, of course it fires. They show him the Forbidden City, it doesn't fire. They show him Obama, it fires. Get it? This guy has learned that Obama has been to the Eiffel Tower. And has learned it in these few minutes, okay? So, you know, we watch the brain at work. We watch the brain learn, okay? That's very interesting, okay? Okay, so these are the specs, okay? What's the algorithm, what's the hardware? All right, I mean, this is the problem I want to solve. Is this clear? Okay. So let's speculate first about hardware. They recorded from about 100 out of 10 million neurons in the medial temporal lobe. And they showed about 100 pictures of familiar persons and places with repetitions. And they found about 10 neurons that responded consistently to one image, okay? Like Jennifer Aniston or Eiffel Tower. So this tells me something. I mean, they couldn't be so lucky, okay? This means that, every one of these concepts is represented by an assembly of many, perhaps 2,000, 20,000 neurons. Okay? In other words, that for the Eiffel Tower, there's not one, but 20,000 such neurons. And we chanced on one. Okay? For Obama, we didn't chance on any neuron that represents. This set of neurons must be highly connected and therefore stable. It is somehow formed spontaneously in response to sensory stimuli. So far, it's uncontroversial. Many neuroscientists believe this, okay? You know, it's mainstream neuroscience, what I'm telling you. Every time we think of this memory, approximately more or less all of these neurons fire, okay? That's why they have stability. They're highly connected and stable. And that's the new thing that this experiment gave us, that two memories can be associated In other words, these two things can creep into each other and start intersecting more, okay? If given the right experience, okay? All right. How about the algorithm then? How are the assemblies formed? How are they recalled? How does association happen, okay? And here is a computational challenge, all right? That you have an extremely sparse graph, okay? And you want to select a set of neurons, a subgraph that is very dense, okay? How do you do that? This is ominously similar to the clique problem in graph theory, which is a very hard problem, okay? We don't know how, we cannot come close to solving it. How do you do it? How do you solve this? And the brain seems to be doing something like that, okay? Okay, so here is the way I want you to think of it. That there is a sensory cortex, like the visual cortex. It sees the Eiffel Tower. It processes it. In the end, it forms this red dot, okay, of neurons that summarize the Eiffel Tower. Then something happens. Some attention mechanism says, I have to remember this, okay? And then this thing starts pulsating, and slowly an assembly of about 10,000 neurons is created, okay? And by the way, I want you to remember why 10,000? Because there is inhibition that does not like, most of our neurons are inhibitory, and their job is to make sure that our brain does not explode, okay? So, it's the job of these neurons to say that no more 10 to the 4 neurons fire at any moment, okay? Okay, so these neurons are scattered, okay? So, we call these concept cells, and concept cells means that they're abstract, okay? And there is some justification for that, because in this dot over there, the red dot, okay, what happens is that this belongs to the sensory cortex. This means that it has links to the outside world, okay? There are cells that encode color. There are cells that encode edges and shape. There are cells that encode motion. But here, this dependence on the outside world, this link to the outside world has been severed, okay? Has been cut. And we have an abstract representation in apparently uniform random set of neurons, okay? And this is what we remember, okay? This is sort of a permanent trace of this object, okay? So the only mathematical way that we have to study this is graph theory, okay? That basically we have to accept that there are edges. This is a directed graph, extremely sparse, and there are many edges going from the sensory cortex to the MTL and among the MTL, okay? And we have measured what is it's the graph GNP, familiar to some of you from Erdős and Rényi. And the probability is, in this particular area of the brain, is about 100 times what it usually is. It's 10 to the, is 1%, okay? Okay. So there is also the concept of plasticity, okay? How brains learn. And how brains learn, according to Hebb, but also according to a lot of experimental evidence, is that when two neurons fire in quick succession and they happen to have a synapse from one to the other, this synapse gets stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, okay? And this is the main mechanism that our brain has for learning. Okay. How does one verify such a theory? And the question is, can you verify it with math, okay? So, how do you do? First of all, you simplify a lot, and then you solve, okay? So we did that. We have a linearized model, okay? What's a linearized model? It's something that has become very, very, very popular now with deep nets, okay? Basically, you say deep nets are nonlinear. Why? Because, and the brain is nonlinear. Why? Because there are the neurons that make a thresholding function, and thresholding function is nonlinear, of course, right? I mean, so, it goes like that. So let's suppose it's not, you know, and basically you write an equation where his is not, this is not whether it's activated or not, that would be nonlinear, but it's a probability of activation, okay? And you keep probabilities around and you create sort of, you know, you calculate probabilities from one generation, from one 10 of milliseconds to the next. And so the probability of activation depend, you know, and these are the synaptic weights between I and J, if I and J is a synapse, depends, first of all, on the strength of the stimulus as it's projected to this part of to this neuron. Okay, in other words, the total signal it receives from the stimulus. And beta is the plasticity coefficient, okay? And this particular part of the equation is exactly Hebb's rule, okay? It basically says that if these two neurons fire successively, then the weight is increased, okay? So you set up this equation, and the amazing thing is that you can solve it, okay? And you really solve it. And here is what is equilibrium is. And that's a very evocative equation, okay? Because basically, here is how you can read it. To be successful means x sub j is what's the probability of eventually being into the assembly, okay? Into the final set. This probability has two terms, okay? One is how much signal you receive, in other words, whether you were born rich, so to speak, okay? You're lucky, so you know you receive a lot of signal. And the other one is how many rich supporters you have, okay? How many other neurons with high probability give you support. And so you know it's this interesting function which is increasing in the region of interest. So you can summarize the equations by saying to be successful, you either have to be born rich, or have many rich supporters, or a little of both. Okay. Okay. So that was very, you know, that was very interesting, invigorating for us. Okay. So you know that we can solve this simplified equation, so and have such an evocative result. But let's, you know, how about the true problem, the nonlinear theorem, okay? And here is what the nonlinear theorem says, that indeed assemblies will be formed with high probability, okay? Probability based on the random graph. First of all, in the first step, the born rich cells fire, okay? That's it, that's trivial. Next, the things that fire next are either some born rich cells and some cells which have a good balance of the others, and it's not far from half and half. Okay, so you know you can solve you can solve for the coefficient of you know for the ratio, and it's quite close. And then it turns out that whenever a cell has fired in 2 consecutive times, it will never stop firing. Okay, it's now stably in the assembly. And every step, a few new sets will be recruited, a few new cells will be recruited, but such recruiting diminishes exponentially. Okay, and these are all the things that we can prove. So, basically, we have a theorem that says that assemblies with high probability will be formed. Okay, again, the connectivity question: how do you solve the clique problem, and how do you associate? All right. So the association is this: that when both Obama and Eiffel Tower in the sensory cortex fire, these assemblies turned out sort of, you know, it become a little closer, okay? It acquire a larger intersection. Okay, the question is, how does this happen? And graph theory does not seem to suffice here, okay, to solve these problems, the connectivity problem and the association problem. Random graph theory says that you have GNP, you have constant probability. It turns out that we need a new model of graph theory, model graph theory, which is based on experimental results by Song and his colleagues. And basically it's something called reciprocity and triangle completion. We call this GMP++, and it means the following, that if you have the edge, the probability, the overall probability is about 1%. But if an edge AB exists, the probability that BA exists is now not 1%, but maybe it's 5%. Okay? And if AB and AC exist, the probability of BC is not 1%, but maybe 6%. Okay? So this sort of, in an interesting way, solves it, because consider these two cells, one in the Eiffel assembly and one in the Obama assembly, right? Now you can make these have a pre-image in, let's say, in the orange dot, okay? And if you make an analysis of the pre-images, you'll see that chances are that they intersect. That's a birthday paradox. Okay, so because they have fire, this means that the pre-image is a priori very large. Okay, and the product, these two pre-images, the product can be larger than the intersection, in which case it means that it's going to fire. They're going to have a common ancestor, and therefore they are going to have a much higher connectivity. Okay, both inside the assemblies and across assemblies if these two images are shown at the same time, like Obama and Eiffel. So it turns out that stimuli A and B are presented, if stimuli A and B are presented in this sequence, first A, then B, then A and B together, then A again, then B again, then with high probability, after the association event, by this I mean the A plus B, a small but constant fraction of the neurons in the assembly for A will also respond for B, and vice versa, B for A. So association does happen. And the phenomenon is a little more intense in GMP++. Okay. And this also shows you a little what, how the brain solves the click problem. It runs rather, I've asked this question to graph theorists, people who work in algorithms for graph theory. How would you find a dense subset in a graph? And nobody gave me this answer, okay, what the brain does. What I think the brain does, okay? Which is, first of all, it selects a random set, and then it selects the set of nodes to which this set projects, okay, that have many connections to this set. And this seems to be a clever algorithm for solving the click, so to speak, problem in very sparse graphs. So plasticity is very important because by firing together, they acquire a lot of strength in the synapses, and triangle completion and the birthday paradox. Okay, so these are the three ways in which, in our model, the brain solves the click problem. Remember the three steps? We talked about specs, we talked about hardware. Essentially, there was no algorithm, okay? The algorithm vanishes, okay? So you know that the algorithm, the hardware and the specs have co-evolved so closely, okay? So that they have been co-adapting for billions of years, okay? So and so the problem was solved without a sophisticated algorithm. And in my experience, in my opinion, we are going to be finding this more and more often. And that's something, by the way, that von Neumann warned us about 70-something years ago. Finally, how much time do I have? Okay, I'll finish in like 5 more minutes. Okay, we are very proud of our brain, okay? And we should be. The point is that, okay, you are all great mathematicians, all right? I mean, if you were in a desert somewhere by yourself, you wouldn't be, okay? Sort of, it's, that our brain, in a boring planet, our brain could not do anything, okay? So we owe what we are to how interesting and challenging the environment is, okay? Here is a surprise. Language is an environment, okay? Because it's a problem you have to solve, all the time. You have to understand what I'm saying. And the interesting thing is that it's an environment that we created, an environment that evolved over 100,000 years, okay? So, and when we acquire language, our brain is exactly how it is today. So, a hypothesis is that language evolved so that to exploit the brain strength. So language is a prime object of study if you are interested in the brain, okay? By studying language, you should be able to get a lot of clues of how the brain works. I believe that language is optimized so that babies can learn it, okay? So to understand how the brain is circuited and in fact wired, in fact what is the circuit for language, I think we'll get a lot of hints by studying language. Chomsky famously said that, linguists don't agree much with Chomsky now, but they agree with this, that let's call the knowledge of language grammar. Chomsky believed strongly that grammar may predate experience, and right now, I am willing to do the following, that by grammar, I don't mean anything very complicated, but a very simple fact that an idea, a sentence, is somebody or something doing something. Okay, so, it's an agent and an action or attribute. It turns out that some of the machinery that I presented to you seem ideally suited for implementing the grammar in the brain. Okay, so let me leave you with one last, something that really made a lasting impression on me. It's experimental results by a group in Munich. The PI is called Friederici. And here is what they found. They found that there are all these pathways that connect. I've forgotten how to. Okay. All right. Bear with me. The purple and the green stuff down there is where especially the purple is where what I've been talking about, where concept cells live. Okay. The green stuff seems to be where nouns and language and words and verbs live, okay? And the brown area up there, 44, is where syntax lives, okay? Where syntax trees maybe are created. And there are these two pathways, the purple pathway and the blue pathway up there, which connect the two, connect the place where words are and the place where syntax happens. And here's what these researchers found, that these two pathways become operational, are myelinated. Without being myelinated, pathway cannot work. At the 4th semester of the infant's life, exactly when syntax kicks in, okay? And the brown area is kept pristine until then, without projections, okay? And when it's ready, when there is enough vocabulary to form sentences, this seems to be happening. So this to me seems a very evocative, very interesting. This is from a recent book by Berwick and Chomsky, Why Only Us? Okay. The great question that I'm very interested in is how can you think computationally about the brain? Assemblies and concept cells may be one starting point and path. And And there is already an interesting methodology that experiments give you the specs and knowledge about the hardware, and the algorithm often is extremely elementary. And the ultimate goal here should be, I believe, language. Okay, so thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you so much for a very interesting talk. Are there any questions? Remarks or comments? Yes, please.
So actually, I have two questions. The first one regards the ideas of Jeff Hawkins, who wrote the book On Intelligence. Right now, I know that in USA, there are emerging companies like Numenta or Paris.
By Jeff Hawkins, yes, right, yeah.
They are trying to basically mimic the brain instead of using simplified models of neurons that are used
Później będzie pani, tak? Po pytaniach.
So I'm very curious, what is your attitude to this new idea? And may I
Yeah, okay, sure. So let me answer this. I mean, so here is another book that I recommend to everybody. It's called On Intelligence, written by Jeff Hawkins and a writer who helped him write it. I mean, but it's the ideas of Jeff Hawkins, basically he has the crispest, most he was an inspiration to me. Okay, the crispest ideas, very concrete. Often wrong, I believe, but very concrete, very bold, very daring, and I believe that's what we need. Okay, and what I showed you is equally bold, daring, and unsubstantiated. It's my conjecture. It's a theorem, that waits experimental verification. And of course, Jeff Hawkins is an entrepreneur. And he has a company that implements these ideas. Okay, so you compared it with DeepMind. Okay, I have seen what DeepMind does, and I'm very impressed. Okay, I have not seen what Jeff Hawkins circuits do. Okay, so I mean, I believe that both are abstractions of the brain. You seem to think that Jeff Hawkins is a more faithful abstraction of the brain, and maybe you have a point. But we know that there are important reasons why deep nets cannot be a very accurate abstraction of the brain. But it's very hard to argue success. The deep nets are doing amazing things that we didn't know how to do before. They are failing for silly reasons, that we still don't understand. Okay, it's really ironic. We don't understand why deep nets work. We don't understand why they don't work. Okay, that's really a terrible situation. But still, they beat humans in Go, and that's extremely impressive.
Thank you. Other questions?
You had a second question.
actually I have
Okay.
It's well, I'm just curious, what do you think about this idea of Kurzweil, about the singularity? Do you think it will emerge, and it will?
Okay. So I don't know how many of you know about the singularity. Okay, very briefly, it's the following. Computational power has been increasing exponentially. When it reaches human intelligence level, okay, this means that human intelligence will keep increasing exponentially. Okay, human intelligence has been increasing very slowly, as you have noticed. Okay, but once it meets, once the two curves meet, okay, they will stay together, and that will be a singularity. Okay. Okay, one little thing is that do a word search, okay? When was brain and singularity was mentioned together, okay? And they were mentioned together for the first time in von Neumann's book, okay? And that's an interesting thing. So first of all, I'm not convinced that computational power will keep its exponential growth forever. You know, because I mean, what you learn from bacteria is exponential growth stops somewhere. Okay. Second, it's not so easy for human intelligence, and I mean, the coupling of human intelligence and machine intelligence is an amazing engineering problem. There is a lot of progress. It's still a very difficult challenge. Okay, so you know how to wire the brain, how to make people who have problems more capable, how to make ordinary people geniuses, and so on. You know, so it's not so easy. It's an interesting thought. It's sort of, you know, it's one of these interesting thoughts that also scare us a little. So you know, it's a good thing. So I mean, I don't think sort of, you know, good prophecies are not the ones that turn out right. Okay, you know, good prophecies are the ones that make us think. Okay, and singularity is making us think.
Yeah. Other questions? No? Yeah, Professor Łuczak?
Yes, I have a question which was provoked by the plan of your talk. Talking about evolution, you mentioned that optimizing function has this entropy factor. And it seems that if most researchers who just study the brain just ignore the fact that algorithms or hardware might have this entropy factor and push all this entropy for this environmental input and so on. So you think that maybe algorithms or maybe software or hardware in the brain have some algorithm which try to maximize, at least in part, entropy, because it seems that it would be required for learning not only that you have this entropy in the input, but it seems that in all the algorithms I've heard, there is this factor is just they try to get rid of it when you learn.
Okay, so many questions, right? I mean, many issues you are raising. I mean, that was an excellent question. In learning algorithms, we don't always care about entropy, but we care. You know, we always regularize. You know, and basically in learning, the main fear is not that we don't learn in the end, okay? The main fear is that we learn too well, okay? Sort of, you know, and we learn this particular example, okay? So, you know, it cannot generalize, right? And this is why I believe, not why, sort of, you know, why is a bad word to use for evolution, okay? Why the entropy regularizer was successful, okay? You know, for all I know, there were many evolutions, and this evolution that we are living now is the one that won, okay? Sort of, you know, because the reason is that you don't want a particular population to learn too well its environment, right? I mean, you know, because the environment may change tomorrow, okay? And it should have the seeds of adapting to tomorrow's environment. I believe that's the reason of success of the entropy function. Now in the brain, okay, so we talked about the regularizers in learning, we talked about evolution. In the brain, entropy enters sort of, you know, in a different way, sort of, you know, that first of all, the brain, in terms of its very nature, okay, that it is a wet, chaotic, grungy mess. Okay, sort of, you know, that difficult to put order in, okay? Has a regularizer in itself, I think, right? I mean, you know, that I don't think that we will ever take a sort of, you know, take a fMRI of a brain and see a lot of order, okay? Sort of, you know, it's going to be always very disorderly. But I mean, you know, the brain has another challenge, which is often forgotten. that it has to do everything it does with 20 watts. You know, the human brain works on 20 watts, okay? This is, okay, you know, this is unthinkable, okay? You know, it's just what our eye does. We don't know how to do it with less than 1 kilowatt, okay? And this, of course, is the big energy challenge, sort of, you know, in the brain. Okay, so you know, and in fact, there are a lot of groups, mostly in Europe, but also IBM in the United States, that are trying to learn from, and actually Intel also, that are trying to learn from the brain. Okay, so you know, create circuits that are energy efficient like the brain. I mean, this is, you know, even if we understand exactly how the brain works, you know, I doubt that we are going to understand how it does all this in such an efficient way.
Okay. Other questions? Seems to be not the case, but we have a representative of Major of Poznań with us who has a small gift for you. So please.
On behalf of our Major of Poznań and Academic and Scientific Society, I would like to welcome you in Poznań. And I've got a small gift for you. This is Polish-English album about last 50 years of Poznań. So I hope it will remind you about our city, about this visit.
Well, thank you very much. You know, I have to tell you, this was. I mean, no, I visit many places, but this was a particularly nice, very warm, very, you know, not the weather, but it was a very human, very warm visit that I will remember. And thank you for giving me this tool for remembering. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I wish you a lot of fruitful discussion and nice time in Poznań. So thank
you
you
very
much.
Time. Yeah. Thanks. Very nice to meet you.
Okay, so let us thank again our speaker and close the session.